All right, everybody. I want to welcome you to our 1 week from tonight is the Seder night. And this year, as we know, the famous Manishtana Laila Zemikol Leilos. What is different from this night and all other nights? Well, this year is going to be very different. A different Pesach for all of us than all other years. And I need to remind everyone the reason for that, but what happens is that we're now going to be home alone, or parents without children, children without parents, families are going to be isolated on their own. And it's interesting because it's the opposite of Pesach for us. It's really the opposite of our Passover experience and our Passover memories. The Seder is always the highlight of family time. But that being said, there was one time in history where we had Pesach exactly like this, although we had our families all in one home, and that is the actual year of the first Pesach. And so the first Paschal offering, the first Karban Pesach, was a requirement. And that requirement was that you're not allowed to share any part of the Pesach offering with anybody at home. You can't invite any outsiders to your home. Everyone had to be their own families. And it's interesting because it's really the total opposite of Judaism. Judaism is all about hachnasas archim, inviting guests. It's all about not throwing anything away and sharing everyone and not worrying about with leftovers, giving away our leftovers. Whereas the Karban Pesach, the first Paschal offering, is exactly the opposite. Yes, there was extended family in our homes. There was children with parents and grandparents, but there was no other guests, there was no other visitors, and everything had to remain alone. Another interesting thing about the Karban Pesach, the Paschal offering, is that it was roasted whereas all other meat in the Torah is cooked. Every other offering in the Torah is cooked. This is the only offering that's actually roasted. And what happens when you roast something, it actually becomes harder versus and tougher versus when you cook meat, it actually breaks it up. It's customary we don't eat roasted meat on the Seder night because of the Paschal offering, which is only allowed to be roasted. And both these ideas have a important meaning, and I think a special meaning is this year, and that is the reason why the Paschal offering could only be in with your family alone and not shared with anybody else, and no inviting any other guests, because Pesach was very much about strengthening the home. It was very about hardening our home in order that we can go out afterwards, in order that we can go out to Yetzias Mitzrayim, leading Egypt, and being able to bring out and fixing the entire world. But you can't fix the world if we don't fix our home. And so we can't go out and share the light if we don't know what we're sharing inside. And so Pesach, which is really about the definition of and the creation of a nation, it first had to be strengthening our home. And so this year, and the same idea with the roasting of the meat, which when you roast, you strengthen the outside, you make a hard crust on the outside, and you leave all the juices on the inside. Whereas on every other sacrifice and all the other food that we eat is cooked. When we cook, what happens is we break down the meat and we make it a melting pot. That's why America is called a melting pot, because the Jews came here and they became assimilated in many ways into the rest of the population. When you roast something, you really create a hard shell with all the juices inside. And that's really on Passover. The idea of the Paschal sacrifice was to strengthen our internal in order to be able to go out and have strength to bring all of that stuff to the external world. And so while every year we are always guests or with large seders and large groups at the table, this year we're very much about strengthening our own home, not by our own choice, but because we have that opportunity, or we have that situation that we're in. Therefore, it's a time where we have to strengthen our own home and strengthen our own ability to lead a Seder. And then, God willing, from this year on, we'll be able to take that message and take that energy and bring it to other Seders throughout the year. And so tonight, what I want to do is, it's really a do-it-yourself Seder. But doing a Seder by yourself, it's not very complicated. and I'm going to give you some of the basics, but I'm also going to give you a little bit of explanation of why we're doing things, besides just the step-by-step. Afterwards, if anyone would like the actual step-by-step Passover Seder, you can see over here is really a Passover Seder step-by-step, really a 1, 2, 3 page on how to run a Seder. And if you like a Hebrew English Haggadah, you can email me, rabbi@jewishdowntown.com, and I will send you links to this PDF, links to some select passages of the Haggadah in the Seder. And like this, you'll have everything that you'll need. If you want select passages, if you want the full text in Hebrew and English, you'll have it to do your own Seder. And so before we begin, we have to really understand what is a Seder. What is the word Seder? And so the word Seder means order. You know what? Let's back up to one more thing. Because this year we're not going to be having public burning of the chametz, and we're not going to have, and so there is something called the checking of the chametz and the looking for the chametz, which is customary. We search our apartment for chametz or our homes, and then we say a kol chamira, which is a interesting verbiage about every 11th thing that I have becomes nullified, and so we don't technically own it. It's also customary we sell our chametz, and so if you like to sell your chametz, you could do that online as well on our website at jewishdowntown.com. And so we start getting prepared for the Seder on Passover. So what are we going to need by the Seder? We're going to need, if you want, I can also send you our a simple list of items you're going to need. And that's pretty much wine, matzah, and here's the to-do list if you want to see on the Seder plate. Maybe I can get my screen a little bigger. Ali, you there? Maybe I can see my screen bigger. Double click. No. Hello. No. Okay. Can't figure it out. So the Seder checklist is like this. You need a Seder plate, which really you don't really need a Seder plate with the one that you saw with all the pictures. Any plate can do. And on that plate, you're going to put like this. Shmura matzah below it. 3 matzahs. You're going to have wine or grape juice, preferably to drink wine. If you can't, then you could drink grape juice. And it's actually customary to have red wine, preferably, unless you're not able to drink red wine. A hard-boiled egg, roasted piece of meat. You can have a roasted piece of poultry, a chicken neck can be done. Some people use a shank bone. Romaine lettuce, a ground horseradish, charosas, which is a mixture of fruits and nuts, and apples and pears, salt water, candles, and a Haggadah. And so that is the Seder checklist. I'm going to place it right over here. You can see it on the screen, and you'll be able to you should be able to get all of those items in Publix. A to Z should be available over there, including the Haggadahs, by the way. If you want a little, most times the Haggadahs are always taken in Publix, but I'm sure right now with everyone running to take toilet paper, they're forgetting to hit the Passover section. And so when you grab your toilet paper, also hit the Passover section. They usually have some Manischewitz Haggadahs, but if not, on our website at jewishdowntown.com /Passover, we have a full downloadable English and Hebrew Passover Haggadah. And so once we are ready to have our Haggadah, we get to the concept of a Seder. What is a Seder? And so a Seder doesn't mean meal. It's not dinner. Passover, it's not Passover dinner. It's Passover Seder. A Seder means an order. An order is it's a step process in order to reach the concept of Exodus. It's in order to prepare ourselves for true freedom, which in itself is an interesting concept this year. We're celebrating true freedom while we're isolated and stuck in our homes. And so true freedom doesn't mean about being free and be able to run outside, although that would be good for this year. But true freedom means it's an internal freedom. It's to be able to be stuck indoors and locked indoors while still being able to be spiritually free, which is a little bit more difficult. but we're going to discuss about this year. And so they have the 15 steps, and each one of these steps adds a little bit of the steps, of the necessary ways in order to reach the level of true freedom. And so it says, in every single generation, we have to see ourselves as if we have left Egypt. And what does that mean? It means that we're not here to kill ourselves and to check every corner and not eat leavened bread for 8 days just to commemorate something that happened in the past. But what we're doing is something a lot more powerful, and that is we're reenacting the actual Exodus, because on this day is the powerful energy of spiritual freedom. And interestingly enough, if you look in the book of Genesis, when the angels come to see Abraham, and so when he was making over there, it says urkike matzos. He's making over there cakes of matzos, which is, by the way, why one of the reasons why we specifically use round shmura matzah. And again, if you don't have any round shmura matzah, please email me your name and your address, and I will send you a round shmura matzah. And it says that Abraham was baking these cakes of matzahs, and it says that time was the same period of time of Passover. Even though Passover is not going to happen, for Abraham's only born in 1948 BC, in the time of from the time of creation, and the time of Passover happens 500 years later, in 2448. But in the energy of time, when God created time has an energy, and this energy has in its spiritual freedom. And so already Abraham was celebrating Passover, even though it predated the entry into Egypt, as well as the Exodus and the slavery and the Exodus. And so it's a very powerful energy that we have in this night, and we celebrate every single year, not just the history of it, but being able to break out and become free. And so the first thing that we do to make our own Seder is we got to, on that Seder checklist, is we got to know that there's an order. We're going to get to why each step of the order. But before we get to the first step of the order, the first thing we do before we start the Seder is we're going to ladies are going to light Yom Tov candles. And so they're going to light the holiday candles. And they light the holiday candles, interestingly enough, different than Friday night. They could be lit anytime during the night, but it has to be lit from an existing flame. And the blessing that they're going to make is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu v'tzitzav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov. And they're going to make a shechianu. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu lizman hazeh. And they do this, and we do this at both Seders at both nights. So we light candles on Wednesday night, and we light candles on Thursday night. Now, Wednesday night we light before it gets dark. It's best to light before it gets dark. On Thursday night, we actually light after it gets dark, because we're celebrating the second day. Now, how do we light on Yom Tov? How do we light on the holidays? From an existing flame. So the way to do that, the easy fix is to get a yahrzeit candle, a 24-hour candle, or to use from an existing flame on your oven, and you're able to light a candle from a candle on the holiday, different than Shabbat. This year, actually, we have 3-day holiday. We have Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday night Shabbat. Friday night has to be before sundown, because Friday night we have to light, we cannot use fire on Shabbat, whereas on a holiday, you're allowed to cook as long as it's from an existing flame. After the ladies light Shabbat candles or holiday candles, bringing the energy and light into the home, we're going to get then to the Haggadah. And so the Haggadah opens up to the Seder plate. Look at that Seder plate. I'm sure all of you know it. Nothing unique over here. But on the Seder plate, we have a number of items. So we'll talk about each item, and we'll talk about each item and what it means to us spiritually. So the first one on the top left-hand side is the beitza, is the egg. And the reason why we have the egg is we were both cooked items on the Seder plate represent both of the offerings that we had in the Holy Temple. One was the Karban Chagiga, was a general holiday sacrifice, and the other one was the Karban Pesach, was the Paschal sacrifice. But the interesting thing about the egg we actually eat, and because we get to celebrate this holiday, it's customary we actually eat this egg dipped in salt water. Many people don't know that. Right before we have Shulchan Orech, and right before we have step number 9, before we have our meal, we actually eat the egg, and we crack open that egg and take off the peel, or you can take off the peel before. It sits nicely on the Seder plate. If you don't crack it right then, because you can crack the outside of the egg, make it nice, sit nicely on that Seder plate, and doesn't roll around. Whereas later on, you're going to take off the shell, and we dip it in salt water a little bit later on. But why an egg? What's the reason for an egg? And so there's two reasons why we use an egg. The first reason is because an egg is round or round-like, just like the Galgal Olam, the world is round, the world constantly turns. And so one of the things that mourners actually eat right when they enter to their home after a funeral, God forbid, is they eat an egg. And the reason why they eat an egg is because to tell us that the world goes round and round. And sometimes we're on top, sometimes we're on the bottom, but to remind us that we're going to get back on top again. And I think it's a very powerful idea, especially right now. Gam ze ya'avor, this is also going to pass. And although it just gets grimmer and grimmer every day, that looks like this is going to be longer and longer, God forbid, but it's going to pass. And sometimes we feel like we're on the top, and sometimes we find out very quickly how much we're on the bottom. But remember that we're going to get back on top again. That's why we're celebrating on the 15th of Nisan, on the most powerful night, when the moon is at its full setting. And so that's the first reason why we have an egg. The second reason why we have an egg is what happens with an egg is different than all other foods. And that is when we cook most foods, they become softer. Whereas when eggs get cooked, they become harder. And so when egg gets cooked and becomes harder, it compares to the Jewish people. That we've been through many different fires and many different tragedies, but that doesn't make us softer, it makes us stronger. And so any challenge in our life, any difficulty in our life is not here to break us down, but it's here to firm us up. It's here to make us stronger. And so that's the reason why we eat an egg on the Pesach Seder, not a raw egg or a scrambled egg or sunny side up or something that's squirmy, but a hard boiled egg. Be like this. As the Jewish people have gone through slavery, they got stronger as a nation, and so too when we go through our challenges and difficulties in our life, which many of us are going through right now, it's here to make us stronger. And so that's the reason for the egg. On the Zroa side, on the to the right hand side of the Seder plate, we have the Karban Pesach, we have the Zroa, the shank bone, which represented by the Paschal sacrifice. It's customary not to eat that. We actually roast it really well because we don't want to eat the meat on that, because it's forbidden for us to eat the Karban Pesach. It's forbidden us to eat the Paschal sacrifice until we have a holy temple. And so we don't eat that. We just look at it, burn it up really well. We actually remove the meat that's on it. And that's how we commemorate the Karban Pesach. In the center, we have the maror, which is the in the center of the plate, which is the maror, of course, is bitter. And why do we have bitter herbs? To remind us of the bitter times that we had in Egypt. Now the reality is that if you don't have horseradish, you can't get horseradish because you're stuck at home and you don't really want to leave it, you really want to get things on Instacart, and Instacart may not have horseradish, although you can really use any horseradish, is you can just really eat the romaine lettuce. The romaine lettuce on its own fulfills the idea of bitter herbs, even though you would say, when you have a Caesar salad, it doesn't really taste that bitter. But actually, the stem of romaine lettuce, when you leave it out a little bit too long, it starts to get bitter. And so we use romaine lettuce for the chazeres, but if you can't get horseradish, you can use the romaine lettuce for your maror as well. We then have the to the left-hand side, we have the karpas. And so the karpas is a vegetable. Let me get that picture for you again so you can see it. On the left-hand side, if you're making your mock Seder plate, what else you can do is you can always download the Seder plate online and just follow with it. And so if you have over there, you can see on the left-hand side is a picture of a onion. You could use a potato. You can use, some people use celery. And the idea of karpas is to dip it into the salt water. Why we dip it into salt water, interestingly enough, is that salt water represents the tears of the Jewish people. And so all the tears that the Jewish people wept while they were slaves in Egypt. But another thing about salt water is, what is the biggest bodies of salt water in the world? And that is the ocean. What saves the Jewish people? And so the Jewish people escape out of Egypt, but they're not saved. The Egyptians are chasing after them, and they're very much going to catch up to them and bring them back. What saves the Jewish people is the splitting of the sea, and splitting of a sea represented by salt water. And so we have here two ideas, two diametrically opposite ideas, but intimately connected about freedom. And that's really what we're going to discuss about tonight. Salt water, which is tears, but salt water that is our salvation. We have it next on the opposite side. We're going to have the same thing again. The charosas. The charosas is made out of. You can take apples and pears and walnuts. It's the most simple way. You can even just take any apples and any nuts and just pour a little bit of wine on it. If you want to get a little more creative, some people add cinnamon and to spice it up a little bit. But it's a sweeter texture of applesauce mixture, walnuts, etc. That's what makes our charosas. What does charosas look like? And so it says, why we eat charosas? Again, charosas looks like mud, like cement, because it reminds us of the bricks that the Jewish people built in the cities of Ramses. But also, what does it do? How do we use the charosas? We don't actually eat spoonfuls of charosas. I don't recommend it, although some kids like to do it. But we take the bitter herbs and we sweeten it. We dip it into the charosas, and so we do that. We again are sweetening the bitterness, and so when we're basically telling God that if you're going to give us something bitter, make it sweet. In life, sometimes we have bitter decrees, and we have bitter decrees that are unfortunately out of our control. But we ask God. We actually ask on Rosh Hashanah when there's a special prayer by Tashlich when we go out to the sea and throw out our sins into the fish. There's actually hiratzon there, and we say that hiratzon. We say mamtikim esagzeres in order to sweeten the decrees, and so we want God to sweeten the decree. We take our bitter herbs and we sweeten it up. Again, you have bitterness together with sweet, and so it's like sweet and sour together. And that's the idea of Passover. On one hand, it's about slavery, but on the other hand, it's very much about freedom. And so we have to have both of those ideas. And then on the bottom, again, we have chazeres. We have the other set of bitter herbs. Because why do we have it twice on the Seder plate? Because we're going to use it twice. And so we use it once by the maror, and the other time that's the center section. And the bottom one we use when we make the sandwich, when we're going to make the Hillel sandwich. And so once we make that Hillel sandwich, we use the bottom part of it. That is the Seder plate. Again, you don't actually need a Seder plate. You can take any plate. My home, actually, we have a custom that I actually use a big table, use napkins on top of the matzahs. And so the Seder plate generally sits on top of the three matzahs, although it doesn't have to. But on the Seder, on the table, when you're preparing for the Seder, we have three matzahs on top of each other, generally in a some type of case. But if not, you can separate those three matzot with a napkin. Don't use precious toilet paper. Napkins are available in Publix. For whatever reason, nobody's using those. And you could separate the matzahs with a napkin, or if you have this special thing at home that many people use, which is called like a matzah cover. And they have a three matzot. What are the three matzot for? One is for the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israelite, representing all three groups of identities of the Jewish people. And again, we're going to use the bottom matzah and the middle matzah throughout the Passover Seder. And then we have wine, and we have wine or grape juice, which we are using to the first step. And so we're going to open up our Haggadah on that first night, and we're going to see on the Haggadah we have the 15 steps. It's customary that we announce the 15 steps, just like you would want to have any type of meeting with a beginning and end. You would want to have the tables of contents to understand that this is not just a one-off thing that we're doing, but there's a beginning and end to this, and a structure to our freedom, which is a crazy thing on its own, because you would think that freedom means to be totally unstructured. You would think that kids All they want to do is run around and play hooky and not go to school. But my kids this morning are just begging to go to school. They need to have structure, because without structure and without friends, as much as the virtual school is doing for them, they actually rather go back to school. And because you think you're free, but when you realize that without a structure, you're totally lost. It says to be the captain of in order to be the free on the seas is only if you're a slave to the compass. And so God gives us a compass, and he gives us a way to structure our lives, and that gives us true freedom. True freedom doesn't mean that we're able to do what we want, but true freedom is able to experience true freedom. And so we have the 15 steps of the Seder, and the first step is Kadesh. Kadesh is we take the grape juice, wine preferably, we fill up our glasses. Tonight, at the night of the Seder, we are all kings. And so we're going to say we're slaves, but we're celebrating that we're slaves. But tonight we're kings and queens, and therefore you can't just depend on the leader of the Seder like you would on a Friday night dinner, have the rabbi or have the household member to lead everyone in the Kiddush, but everyone has to say Kiddush tonight. Men, women, and children. Children with grape juice, men and women with wine. And we all say together the blessing of Kiddush. And if you don't know Hebrew, you can read along in English, or you can find online the transliteration. We don't start with Savrima. We don't start with Yom HaShishi. It's not a Friday night. We start where it says Savrima Arnan on top over here, and we make the blessing on the Kiddush. Now we begin with Kiddush. Kiddush means something. If you ask someone what Kiddush is, people will say Kiddush means wine. Kiddush means grape juice. Kiddush means a blessing over wine. But actually, the word Kiddush means holy. It comes from the word Kadosh, is holiness. What happens is on Friday night, and what happens is on Passover, is we're actually separating ourselves. Kiddush actually means separation between the mundane, the physical week, and the holiness, the spirituality. And so that's what we do in Kiddush. Very interesting is that marriage in the Torah is called Kiddushin. Kiddushin doesn't actually mean marriage, it means holiness. But the same thing when we get married, which we use a glass of wine when we get married, is we are separating ourselves from the general population, and we're exclusively connecting to our spouse. And the same thing happens when we make Kiddush. We're separating ourselves from the mundane, and we're exclusively connecting to Hashem, to God. And so the first thing in order to celebrate our freedom and to really experience Exodus, we have to realize is we got to cut off our past, and we got to cut off our previous ways. We can't just keep on doing the same thing and expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. But the first thing is we got to take a break and make a separation. And so we do that by Kiddush, by making Kiddush on wine. Passover, it's customary that we drink red wine instead of ordinarily any other time, which could be any type of wine. And that is because red represents the color of blood. And so you can say blood of the Jewish children that were thrown into the sea. But you can also say blood that was the first plague. Dam Tzvardea was one of the first plagues that God brought upon the Egyptians. And so we have, again, the same idea, again, of sadness and joy, or it wasn't joy, but it was a sadness and salvation. And that's why we use red wine preferably. If you can't drink it, if you don't have it, if you can't drink red wine, you could use white wine. If you can't drink that, you can go with grape juice. But that is the customary. And then when we drink the Passover wine, by the way, just for those that may not know, we have amazing kosher wines. Passover wine doesn't mean you have to drink Manischewitz or sweet wine that you can't drink and enjoy. It's a great time to go and check out. It's not a great time to go and check out anything right now, but if you want an Instacart, Total Wine has a great selection of kosher wines. Obviously, if we're going to have a Passover Seder, we want to just not just commemorate, we want to just actually act as a free Jew. And as a free Jew, today we have apps that deliver us amazing kosher wines. So you can go online to Total Wine and More. You don't have to get Manischewitz. If you prefer Manischewitz, that's your thing. I definitely don't. I enjoy a nice red wine. There's some great Israeli wines that are just as good as non-kosher wines. You can find them on Total Wine section. Just search for kosher. You have Yatir, you have Cave, you have Baron Herzog, and there's a lot of great kosher wines that will be delivered straight to your apartment. You don't even have to get outside. But if you want to, you can visit your local kosher store. Some of the Publixes as well have kosher wine, and when we drink this wine, we're going to actually lean to our left-hand side. And so one of the we don't actually fulfill the proper way of doing the mitzvah without leaning to our left-hand side. Why would we lean to our right-hand side? Then God forbid we can choke. But why are we leaning to because our trachea is on the right-hand side. Why are we leaning to our left-hand side? We're leaning to our left-hand side because we are like kings, and like kings and queens, we're like just sitting back and enjoying the fact that we are free people. And so it's customary that we lean to our left-hand side when we eat, when we drink our wine, all 4 glasses, and when we eat the matzah, and when we eat the sandwich. We do not lean when we eat the maror because that represents bitter herbs. And so now that we separated ourselves and we're making ourselves holy, we have the next step of becoming free, and that is orchatz. Orchatz means we wash our hands, but this time when we wash our hands, generally on all times of the year when we wash our hands, this is a very good time to wash our hands in general. You should constantly be washing your hands. The Seder is great about washing hands. We have multiple times to wash our hands during the Seder, but this time we're washing our hands is without a blessing. And so we're going to wash our hands without a blessing, and which is interesting because we always make a blessing when we wash our hands for bread, but we're not eating bread. What are we doing? We are eating karpas. We're taking going to that Seder plate and taking that vegetable, that onion, potato, or celery, to dip it into salt water. But what are we doing when we do orchatz? Orchatz are washing ourselves off. It's like a mikvah, it's like a cleansing. And so we first separate ourselves, but now we're ready to become anew. Become renewed is we're cleansing ourselves. And so what we're doing is we wash ourselves. The next thing we do is we do karpas. When we do karpas is we're taking, I mentioned earlier, we're taking that vegetable and the potato or the celery. Some people use onion, and we're going to now lift it up and we're going to make a blessing. What is that blessing? It's in the Haggadah. It's Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam bori pri adama. And so we're going to thank Hashem before we eat anything. We thank Hashem for this vegetable. But interesting here is we're going to have in mind about the maror later on, because later on we're going to eat maror, which is also a vegetable from the ground, but we don't make a blessing on maror because it represents bitterness, and we don't want to bless God for bitterness, but we bless God for the good and for the bad. Even, God forbid, when someone passes away, we say Baruch Dayan Ha'emes, which unfortunately we're saying a little bit too much right now, and God willing, we'll just make good blessings going forward. But we bless God for the good and for the bad. Nevertheless, when we bless God for food, bitterness is not something that we're going to be satiated on, but the vegetable we're going to enjoy. And so we have later a mind for the bitter herbs later on, and we're dipping into the karpas. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of karpas? What's the purpose of? And so on the metaphysical side, is karpas is like dipping into the salt water, like going to like putting ourselves in a mikveh in the salt water in the ocean and preparing ourselves to come out anew. But really, what's the reason? Why do we have karpas? What's the whole? And the answer is it's to make us ask questions. And so a lot of the things about the Seder is to get our children to ask questions. What does it mean to get our children to ask questions? It's us. We are all children, especially this year. This year, many of us are going to be parents sitting at home without our children. Many of us are going to be children sitting at home without our parents. And so really, who are we asking these questions? So we're all children of God, and we have to ask questions. You know, is the great Nobel Prize winner was one of the great Nobel Prize winners. He always Levy. He always used to say when most kids came home and their parents asked if you had all the answers to all the questions that were asked, and his mother always asked, do you have any good questions in school today? And so it's always easier know to have the right questions is critical. And so the first thing that we're doing as Karpas is we want to have questions. We want to know what give us a reason of why the question, keep us motivated through this process. And so Karpas is about getting the kids to ask, why are we doing this? And so the answer, we start beginning with an answer very shortly, and we move on to the next step. And that next step is yachatz. Yachatz is breaking of that matzah. And so remember, we had the Seder plate and we had the 3 matzahs below it, or 3 matzahs separate, or even your own matzah in front of you also works. And we're going to take that matzah. Generally, that's the middle matzah, but if you only have 1 matzah in front of you when you're running a Seder with multiple people, then you will take that 1 matzah and you're going to split that matzah in half. And the smaller piece is going to we're going to take that middle matzah and break it into 2, and the larger piece we're going to put away for the afikomen, for our dessert, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The afikomen that we're going to go hide, even though this year we don't have many. We may not have people at home to go and look for it, but for the afikomen, and the smaller half gets back where it is, and that's where we're going to eat matzah. Well, this idea of yachatz, yachatz means breaking. And so we went through a number of steps. One was first separating ourselves. The next one was cleansing ourselves. And now we're about yachatz, breaking ourselves, to realize that we have to have humility. Really, that's all what matzah is about. Matzah is the poor man's bread. I was going to say first thing in Magid, the first verses that we're going to say is Heilach Ma'anya. This is the poor man's bread that we ate and living in Egypt. You know, I asked when we just read this Torah portion a couple of months ago in shul, and I asked, what does it mean? This is the poor man's bread. Why are we even eating matzah on Passover? So he said, oh, of course, to commemorate that the Jews didn't have enough time to leave Egypt. And because they didn't have enough time to leave Egypt and they had to rush out, and then they didn't have the amount of time to bake bread. And therefore, we eat matzah today. Let me ask you a simple question. You ever try to put your kids in the car? How long does it take? Try to put 600,000 people leaving Egypt, or 3 million to be, it's a real number. 600,000 is just the adults, the male adults from the age of 20 and 60. 3 million people. It's a massive caravan. You know what the time process between chametz and matzah? It's 18 minutes. Difference between leavened and unleavened bread is 18 minutes. Difference, what is the difference between chametz and matzah? And so matzah is the bread of humility. It's flat. It doesn't rise. Chametz is all about rising. It's about ego. But really, what is that timing? What would define something between matzah or a forbidden cracker or a forbidden pizza? And that is 18 minutes of time. Is the moment from the water hits the flour, and it takes 18 minutes to germinate and to start rising. Now, you're telling me that the Jews didn't have 18 minutes and their 3 million group while they were on their way out of Egypt? Remember, they were each walking away with donkeys full of silver and gold that they built the beautiful tabernacle with and brought the gold to Jerusalem. They each had tons of people going with them. They didn't have 18 minutes. They can eat proper bread and cook and have chametz. And so the answer is, of course, they had the 18 minutes. But the idea of matzah is something more powerful. Why didn't they why did they have to get rushed out? What was the idea about rushing out? Because they didn't have any time to wait. Because if they would have started waiting and calculating and trying to figure out, is this worth going? Is it not worth going? What's our chances of survival? That's what it means. They didn't have time lisamea to wait. If they started calculating so much in their lives and trying to figure out every single moment, if they're going to leave Egypt, if it's worth it, if they're going to get there, and when they're going to get there, and how they're going to get there, then they would have never left. Like many Jews who didn't leave Egypt, sadly. And so the Jews who left Egypt, the matzah reminds us that sometimes we can't just over-calculate. We can't analyze. Many people had everything calculated, every single meeting calculated, all their plans calculated. Some people working on events and weddings and trips and plans up to kazoo over the last who knows how long, and preparing for this March and April and Passover. What are they going to be? And their Passover plans and programs and the Passover plan. Everybody's making so many different plans, and it's important to plan. But Sometimes we can't overanalyze, overcalculate, because if we don't take that moment to make a jump and that moment to leap of faith, we may miss it. And we see over here with all the calculations that we make, sometimes a mensch tracht and God lacht. It says that a man thinks and God laughs. And we don't know what God's plans are. We, of course, we live a life based on analysis, but we have to know that sometimes we have to be able to make that leap of faith. And so that's really of matzah. Matzah is not just the poor man's bread, but it's called the bread of faith. It's the bread of emunah. And so it's the bread of faith. And in order to have faith in God means we have to have humility, because I have to be able to realize that I don't know everything. And I don't know everything that's going to go on. And as we see very much in this time, almost nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything that's going to happen. How long is this going to last? When we're going to be back in school? When we're going to be back in shul? And so it teaches us something very powerful, and that is humility. When we have humility, we're able to have faith in a higher being, in Hashem. And so really that's what Yachatz is about. Yachatz is about breaking ourselves to be able to have that humility. On a regular year, we have to break ourselves. We have to break that matzah. This year, it was sort of done for us. We've been stuck at home long enough that we've been broken. And so it's a little bit easier this year to eat the matzah, the bread of faith. But that's the idea of Yachatz. Yachatz is about taking the bread of faith, the matzah, and being able to internalize it, being able to take it in and realize, and being able to realize that this is all about realizing that we don't know everything and connecting to a higher being. And so once we get past those 4 steps of breaking, of making ourselves holy and separating ourselves, cleansing ourselves in the mikvah, breaking ourselves of humility, now we got to do is what? We got to start talking. We got to start talking about our past. You can't know how to change the future if you don't realize where you came from. And that's all about Magid. Any therapist will tell you the only way we can talk about change is about talking, is about communicating, because if we hold it in, if we hold in what's inside of us, then we can never actually change. We actually have to discuss where we were, what were the mistakes that we made, what are we going to do, and how are we going to change it? And that's how we start off right away with the story of Helach Manya. This is the bread of affliction. When we do that, we raise up the bread, and we're going to say, this is the bread of affliction our fathers ate in Egypt. Whoever next year in the land of Israel, this year we are slaves, next year we are free people. If you notice, actually, the language itself. The language itself says next year in Jerusalem, and then it says next year we're a free people in Aramaic, and so in Hebrew, because the Jews lived in a land of many years where they would think that they were rebelling in the Babylonian times in the Aramaic, and therefore that's written in Hebrew. And then we get to the questions, which of course, even if we don't have children, we should ask those questions. It's a very powerful idea of us learning the importance of asking questions, not always knowing, but very important about asking. And it's about, and this is all we're going to get through. I'm not going to spend too much time on Magid itself, because we can spend hours on it. Other than Passover is all about reliving our past in order to change our future. It's not about storytelling. We're not about doing all this just in order to remember something that happened thousands of years ago. We don't have to go through cleaning our homes. We don't have to go through all that process just to remember something that happened. But we need to realize that we're discussing what happened in order to change our future. And so the first thing that we do is we discuss all that, and we go through the story of Magid, of storytelling, of telling our children, telling our spouses, telling where we are from, and how we're going to make a plan to become free people, how we're going to make a plan to become better. The purpose of Passover is not just to remember history, but it's about changing ourselves. We then get to something very unique point of Magid, and that is where we get to Dam, Tzvardeya, Kinim, Arayv, which are called the plagues. Some would say, I saw someone sent me a quote, it took a plague to cancel Passover this year. But we all see what a plague looks like, and nobody enjoys a plague. And even to our worst enemies, nobody would want this horrible plague. And so when we mention these plagues of Dam Ve'esh V'Simrei Sashim, and as well as Dam Tzvardeya Kini Marayv, when we get to blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, what we actually do is we take a little bit of wine out of our glass. So we poured that second glass, when we got read the Manishtana, we poured that second glass. We're going to drink 4 glasses of wine, representing the 4 sons, representing the 4 different verses of freedom that we read in the Torah. That he took me out, he saved me, and he led us out, and he redeemed us. And we also have the 5th cup, which is for Eliyahu and Navi for the 5th saying as well. So we're going to fill up that second glass. I missed that by Manishtana. And now we're going to pour out a little bit of wine by each plague. So we do Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, Arab, each one dropping out a little bit of wine, showing that even though we're talking about plagues, and the plagues was an important process for the Jewish people to leave Egypt, but nobody enjoys when it sees other people suffering, even if there are enemies. And therefore we pour a little bit of joy. Wine represents our joy, represents our happiness. When we says, Ein simcha ela basar v'yayin, there's no simcha without wine. Wine makes us joyous. And therefore we take a little bit of that joy and we pour it out into a plate. Some of the custom that they put into a broken plate, and then we get to the famous song of Dayenu. It will be enough, which is a very interesting song, because a lot of the parts of Dayenu, it wouldn't make sense. God couldn't have taken us. It wouldn't be enough if he took us out here, but he didn't do this for us, because he wouldn't have saved us. But it's about realizing Dayenu is very important to realize. And it's a very important idea that we have, that we're visualizing now, especially, and that is to be able to be thankful for what we have and realize that everything is a gift. And even in challenging times, to see the beautiful things that God gave us. You know, we're here in Miami, and it's been beautiful weather for the last month. I have many friends in New York who are sitting in their quarantine, living in Brooklyn in small apartments, and it's been raining day in and day out. There's so many things to thank Hashem for. So many things that we have to be thankful that we have our families together with us. We have to be thankful that we're able to sit on Zoom and be able to connect with people. And imagine, God forbid, we didn't have all of these social media tools that we have today, that we're able to connect with each other technologically. 15 years ago, this plague would have came to us, and God forbid there would be many more deaths, because we wouldn't be able to communicate with each other about the danger of it. But we'd also lose that connection that we do have, and that is the Zooms, the Facebooks, the WhatsApps, that we're able to connect with each other visually, even if not physically close. But we're able to sit in and give classes and be able to communicate with each other on a different level. And so we have so many things to give thanks for. And so it's a difficult time, because it's starting to get to us. It's week 3 of quarantine. Some of us are already going on week 4 of quarantine. And there's no question that it's difficult in many different ways. But it's time to thank Hashem. It's time to give thanks. When we give thanks, God gives us blessings. And so that's the great song about Dayenu. That's right before we finish off the story of Magid. We finish off talking about all of our past. We realize even through all our past, we go through our past, it's been rough. We were slaves in Egypt. We went through pogroms. We went through the Inquisition. We went through the Holocaust. I mean, we've been through so many things in our life. This is a horrible past. No, Dayenu, thank you, Hashem. If you did this for us, it would be enough. Thank you for all of the things that we're still standing here today. Thank you for the blessings that you've given us that we're standing here today. Thank you for, we say, thank you for renewing for this moment that we reached until this moment. We don't focus on the negativity and the negative things that happen. We discuss it and we speak about it. It's really about Magid. We discuss about many of the different things of slavery and challenges. But when we realize that all of the beautiful things that God gave us, we don't focus on the 210 years of murder of the Jewish people and negativity that happened to us in Egypt. We mention it, and we mention the bitterness, and we're going to eat bitter herbs. But when do we celebrate? Is when we say, thank you, Hashem, Dayenu. If you gave this would be enough, to show our appreciation. Appreciation is so important to show. So we show our appreciation, then God gives us great blessings. We then get to the final part of the Magid, and that is with the second blessing of wine. We don't just say Baruch Glory Be'Gafen, but there's a long blessing that we make over here. Baruch Hashem Asher Galanu B'Galas Avosenu, redeemed us again. If you don't, the most important thing about a Seder, this is very important, is you don't have to go through every single word. It's best to, In life, it's best to obviously finish everything. But if you can't, most important is to have 4 glasses of wine, and there's a process for the 4 glasses of wine. Eat your matzah and eat your maror. Those are the biblical requirements. Those are the all of the verses and all the texts. If you're gonna get lost on them and not make it to cup number 3 or 4, or not make it to matzah, don't do it. Pick a couple of meaningful ones. Most important that's biblically required on the Seder night is to have the matzah and have the maror, and of course drink the wine. And so now that we finished telling everything, now we're ready for a new part of our life, and that is we talked about the past. We realize we have to be humble. We realize that we are very appreciative of everything, okay? But we realize that besides the humility and appreciation, we're ready to move on. We're ready to get out. We're ready to celebrate on our new experience. And that's really where we're hopefully going to be soon. That even though we took on a lot of different ideas that we have experienced and we learned many different ways and new things of survival, new recipes while we were at home, new ways of communication, and new ways to keep ourselves busy, and new hobbies, we're ready to get out and to continue with our life, but with a new compassion. And that is the next step. And that is, we again wash our hands. Remember, I told you we're going to wash our hands multiple times. Always good to wash your hands. And that is, this time we're going to wash our hands. We're going to make a blessing. We make a blessing of Al Natilat Yadayim, and then we're going to eat the matzah. And over here, we're going to make the blessing on first we're going to make a blessing that we make on our challah every single Friday night, or anytime that we eat bread. And that's Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And then we get to the next step, which is an actual special mitzvah for matzah. And that is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'tzivanu al achilas matzah, for the eating of the matzah. And so you have one which is general bread, and one is for the matzah itself. And after we eat that matzah, we're going to take that middle matzah, that smaller part that we left over from the afikomen, and we're going to eat that matzah. And then we're going to eat a little bit more. It's customary to eat at least a mouthful, which is about 1 full size of matzah. So we eat the bottom matzah as well. Then we get to the maror. Side points: when we ate the matzah, remember what I said in the beginning, we lean over to our left-hand side, showing that we're kings. And while we're eating that matzah, easy tip, you're going to get a lot of crumbs on you. Put a little napkin over you. You won't get the crumbs on your shirt, and you'll be able to clean it up very easily. We then get to maror. So we're going to take the maror from our Seder plate, and we take that maror. If you have some horseradish, it's best to put the horseradish inside of the romaine lettuce. And if you don't have any horseradish, you guess using romaine lettuce, and then we dip it into the charoses. After we dip into charoses, we're going to lift it up, and we're going to make a blessing. This blessing is not the hadama. It's not the blessing of thanking God for giving us vegetables, because we made that blessing on the karpas in the beginning. But we're going to make a blessing of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'tzivanu al achilas maror, and we're not going to lean to our left-hand side, because we're not celebrating as kings right now. We're remembering the bitter times, remembering that within our salvations, there's always bitterness. With the bitter times comes salvation. And so while we're blessing God for it, we're not going to artificially lean to our left-hand side like we're kings when we're dealing with the bitter moments of our life. And then we're going to take korech. Korech is interesting, because korech, you have on one hand, you have the matzah, you have the bitter herbs, but you also have the charos. You mix it all together, and it's not a sad moment. You're actually supposed to lean to your left-hand side. And that really tells us the story of our life. Korech is that sandwich, that mix of everything, which is really our whole life. Our whole life is a mixture. It's a mixture of bitterness, of sweetness, of crunch, of staleness. You got a little bit of everything in there. And that's really the Jewish experience. And so we're going to still, even though some of that Jewish experience comes with some moments of bitterness, we're going to lean to our left-hand side when we have that sandwich. And there's words that we say that these were this is the way that they used to eat this the sandwich. So if Hillel would eat it with Pesach, Matzah, Hamar all together, because really it was also together with the Pesach offering, which is all about the meat in the sandwich. We don't have that today because we don't have the temple, but it's really about the full-on experience of life, which comes with highs and lows, and we take that with celebration, even though it comes with even though there's some bitterness, and that's why we leave to our left-hand side. And then we get to Shulchan Aruch. And Shulchan Aruch is about having a set table. It's very interesting to say Shulchan Aruch, a set table. Could have said dinner, time for dinner, but it doesn't say that. It says Shulchan Aruch, set table. Interesting, the words of Shulchan Aruch is the same words that we have code of Jewish law. It's called Shulchan Aruch, and so it's a very similar word, Shulchan Aruch and Shulchan Aruch. It's very, very similar words. Set table and code of Jewish law. It's One has nothing to do with the other one. One is a Shulchan Aruch and one is a Shulchan Aruch. But in reality, there's something very important there, and that is it's a set table, meaning it's not a time just to. It's an experience. So of course, we're all hungry. We're all waiting to get to that moment. We're going to get to that chicken soup, and we remember before that we're taking that egg and we're dipping that egg into salt water again, eating that egg that we had on our Seder plate. But we're going to get the brisket, and we're going to get the meat and the chicken and the moments we've been waiting for all this time. But to remember that in order to become free, it's not about pressing and stuffing our face. It's about having a set table. It's having a set structure. And this is probably one of the most difficult things, especially as a lesson for now, because now is a time where we have no structure. We have a structureless life. We have no meetings. We have no systems. We have no school for our kids. We have every possible reason to be not focused. And when we create a structure, Passover tells us, create that structure. Create that Shulchan Aruch, create that set table. You can create that structure in your own home, isolated in your own home. You create that structure. That's what it means to become free. When you're able to be free be able to control your time, when you have nothing to control it, nothing external controlling it, that's truly what it means to be free. And that's what Shulchan Aruch means. We then get to Tzafun, which is the afikomen, remembering that before we ate the afikomen, before we ate the matzah, when we broke the matzah, it's about humility. But Tzafun is all about freedom. Now we're eating the matzah out of faith. We get to Beirach, we get to thanking Hashem. Remember, we have to have gratitude, and that's why we make a blessing after meals, benching, and halal nirtzah, some praising of God. Very interesting thing that we do during the end of the Seder is we welcome Eliyahu Hanavi. And so we have that fifth cup, which is in the center of the table is a fifth cup, and we welcome Elijah the prophet. Why we welcome Elijah the prophet? And so, or some jokes that are going around now. How we open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi? He's been at everybody else's house this year. And so, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, is the most famous prophet, and he's famous for redemption. He's going to herald the redemption. But he's also famous for something else, and that is that there was a time where the Jewish people were out at their lowest moments. They were following a idol called the Baal, and it was Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, against the prophets of the Baal. And basically, he turns to God and he says, "God, there's no hope for the Jewish people. There's no way they're going to last." And so God says, "There's no way they're going to last. Not only are they going to last, you're going to witness it. You're going to go and witness every single bris, every single circumcision." That's why we set up a kisei shel Eliyahu, a chair of Elijah. You can see every synagogue has one set up. We have one right there. And you're going to visit everybody, every Seder, at the Seder. And so why the Seder? Why does God choose the Seder to visit? And the answer is because that is when usually every single Jew is having a Passover Seder. We're all very close to a Passover Seder. And so Elijah the prophet's coming to witness that we're there, and he's coming to witness not just that we're there, but he's going to tell God, everybody's there. We're all having the Seder. It's time to take them out of exile. And so it says Elijah the prophet will herald the coming of Mashiach. How do we welcome Elijah the prophet? It's customary. We take the candles, which light candles represent the soul of God. Ner Havaya Nishmas Adam. So the candle, the soul of a man is like a candle of God, and so that's why we use a candle by Yortzeit. It represents spirituality. It's why we bring in Shabbat with light and the holidays with lighting candles. And so we take those candles to our door as we welcome Elijah the prophet, who's going to come in. And then as we finish off, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Of course, it's a very fun time to get up and sing and enjoy, because it's all about finishing the Seder. It's really about realizing that we're going to take this in order to be able to go to Jerusalem and be able to have redemption. It's only by realizing and taking the structure that we have. And so, God willing, it's as the Rebbe would always say, that just as God took us out of Egypt, so may show us wonders, that from Nisan, the month of Nisan that we're in, we were redeemed, and in Nisan we will be redeemed. And every single there's a special time always for redemption. Redemption can come anytime, but especially on Pesach, which is all about the holiday of redemption. It's all about celebrating the possible moment. And I think this year it has a deeper meaning for all of us. And that is not just the ultimate redemption, but redemption from this terrible plague, redemption from this coronavirus, to be able to go out and to have a world of health and a world of peace and a world of that we're able to live in a normal way. And so when we the idea that we sing is at the end of Lashana Babi Yerushalayim is not that we finish the Seder. It has nothing to do with that. We just finished the Seder and therefore we're singing it, that we're dancing around, that we're happy that we're done. Being happy that we're done is nothing to do with the Seder. The purpose of the Seder is to take that energy and be able to bring it into our lives, to be able to take that 15 steps and not just eat some brisket and not just drink some wine and get a little tipsy, eat some matzah and get a little constipated, or all the different foods that are going to mess up with our bodies. Make sure you have some vitamin C as well, of course, as it's good for your immune system. Matzah is very good for your faith system, but not necessarily for immune system, or wine. But it's really about making a change in our lives. And the purpose of this whole cleansing of our chametz and cleaning of our chametz and burning of our chametz is not just a physical idea. It's not just a thing that we enact, but it's really a spiritual idea. And that is, it's time to clean up our ego that's inside of us. The world is having an entire cleansing right now. Our whole life is having a whole different meaning right now than it ever has before. And so the Seder is really about recognizing that moment and being able to take that and bring it into the rest of the year. And hopefully we'll be able to bring it into a rest of a normal year. We'll be able to say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. We'll all be able to go back to Jerusalem and be able to celebrate, because right now we can't get to Jerusalem. There's no one at the Kotel, sadly. So be able to celebrate a time where we have the coming of Mashiach. May it happen very soon in our days. Amen. And again, for everyone that's here on our Zoom and everybody that's watching on Facebook Live, if you need anything for the Passover Seder, please email me, rabbi@jewishdowntown.com. You can go onto our website where we have all of our catering, and we have Seder plates there and all the other things that are necessary for Passover Seder at jewishdowntown.com/Passover 2020. And if you need, if you don't have shmura matzah, handmade shmura matzah, please email me by tomorrow so we can get it in the mail. I can't hand deliver it this year, but we're putting in the mail shmura matzah, so it can reach you on time. You can email me, rabbi@jewishdowntown.com, and we'll make sure that you have some handmade shmura matzah. Handmade, it was, don't worry, no corona-free, for your Seder. Have a good night, everyone, and happy, healthy, and a kosher Passover.